So hi everyone. Thanks for joining. The CTribe quarterly talks. So this is our effort, a small effort from our side to contribute to the built environment in India, and we have been talking to a lot of different contributors in the ecosystem and trying to get some knowledge spread. Through all the stakeholders. So joining today with us is KP Reddy, who is the CEO and managing partner of Shadow Ventures and Shadow Partners. And today's topic is pretty interesting. It's about AI constructs shaping the future of built environment. Is related to the topic of artificial intelligence, which has been in the talks for some time, and now especially in the past few months with Chat GPT and everything that's coming out in the market. So thank you so much for joining us, KP.
Oh yeah, for sure. Happy to be here.
Yep. Again, I'm sure everyone who joined the call pretty much knows you, but do you want to just introduce yourself and talk a
Yeah.
little bit more about what you do at Shadow?
Yeah. Quick background. I think I'm a second generation civil engineer. My dad immigrated from Hyderabad to the U.S. in the late 50s. Was chief engineer of Portman, Erie, and a bunch of other firms here. So I moved back to Hyderabad for high school when I was 13. So I actually went to high school at Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan in Jubilee Hills. And then came back here, went to Georgia Tech, practiced as a civil engineer, and worked for a while, and then started my first startup when I was 25 years old, and was fortunate enough to take that public when I was 28. So that gave me a lot of room to do different things, and so started several companies, some in the BIM space, some in the telecom space. And then, after all that, started teaching at Georgia Tech, ran Georgia Tech's incubator here in Atlanta. And after that, decided I'd leave the entrepreneurship stuff to some of the younger guys and gals. And I didn't have another 10 years in it for me to devote 80 hours a week to a startup. So I decided to start investing. And I was very fortunate. Most of my backing has come from industry. So engineering firms like Thornton Tomasetti, Walter P. Moore, Siska Hennessy, WGI, construction companies like Hensel Phelps and Whiting Turner and Winter Construction. So we have about almost 100 industry investors. And then we've got about 20 or 30 financial investors that keep us honest to make sure we deliver great returns. So it's a pretty simple formula. If our investors are your customers, when we pick companies to invest in, we all have an unfair advantage.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a great way to start off, right? And again, I'll just get right into the topic of the AI and the topic of discussion right now. I see NK joining as well, which is part of your portfolio company. So I'd like to I'm sure you talk to a lot of startups in the space trying to implement AI in some capacity, right? What are the most exciting trends in construction technology at this point on what you're seeing, what you're listening from your LPs?
Yeah, so I think clearly AI is a hot topic, but also understanding that AI has been around for a while, right? We've already made lots of investments in the fields of AI. The challenge right now is there's so much clutter because it's now leveled the playing field. It used to be very hard to implement an AI feature or even an AI-based platform. And now, you spin up OpenAI and you can do some things very quickly. And so it's really a hard time. We're not excited about companies that are deploying OpenAI and just creating some small data set for themselves that's industry-based or putting it on top of a workflow. We like to see foundational, defensible technology. And a lot of founders mistake. They'll tell me things like, look what we built in 2 months. And I was like, if you can build it in 2 months, I can probably build it in 1 month. And so it's not worth that much, right? So part of the challenge is always making sure as a founder, you're building defensibility and some kind of moat and something that's hard for someone else to replicate. And unfortunately, right now, most of the AI things I'm seeing just aren't that impressive. I mean, the demos are impressive, but the foundational technology is not that impressive. It could be easily copied, right? So we care about defensibility. We like funding startups that can spend 1 or 2 years not worrying about revenue and just worrying about building the right technology to serve, to create the best client experience. So I think the challenge right now with our LPs, they're seeing so much noise and they're not technologists. I've been coding since I was 13, and my partner, Matt Ullman, our CTO, still codes, right? But to a structural engineering firm or an architect, they can see a demo, and then they'll send me an email saying, "Oh my gosh, did you see this?" And I said, "Yeah, I've seen 20 people doing this." So I think there's going to be a cycle of too many things coming out, people not being able to understand it, and they're just going to stop for a minute to really understand what's going on.
That's interesting. So as a follow-up to that, right? Again, um, what are the, I mean, as you mentioned, probably answered the question in some form in your previous question as well. So, what are the kind of challenges or roadblocks that construction tech startups are, facing at this point?
Yeah.
Or how do they address them immediately, effectively?
Well, I think the number one challenge is they don't raise enough money. They don't raise enough money on the outset. This industry moves slow. It'll move slow for a very long time. The market moves slow, and then it'll move very fast. So it's important to be able to stick to your vision. I talked to a lot of founders, and 2 years into it, the first thing they tell me about their startup is how much ARR they have. Whereas if you talk to a founder in the first 3 months of founding, they talk to you with so much passion about the problem and how they're solving it and how amazing, just that's what they're focused on. And so I think it's really important to give you enough to stay on your vision of what you're passionate about. But to do that, you have to give yourself enough capital and enough runway to do it. The other thing is this industry tends to have a long memory, right? So what that means is if there was a startup before you that was trying to solve the problem and they failed, the construction community doesn't say, "Oh, they failed. Good try. Let's try it again." They say, I'm not doing that ever again. I'm not going to do that." They say, "I got burned." Because while they might spend thousands with the construction tech company, they have at risk tens, hundreds of millions of dollars, right? Are at risk. And so they have a long memory with some of those things. So it's really important to be a good listener and really communicate well with the customer about what they need and what their challenges are and what the history has been. How have you solved this problem in the past? Type of questions.
Yeah, that's an interesting take, right? I mean, um, so obviously, as you said, construction companies and architectural AEC firms in general are pretty much in a way risk averse, right? But obviously they're trying to get into the technology space and trying to implement all that, right? Like how do you think like construction tech startups should kind of collaborate or establish that connection with companies to adopt again AI technologies in general and obviously general construction startups, and what are some of the successful collaboration models you've seen?
Yeah, I think it's important. I don't know. I think, if you're more of a tech founder, you're very quick to show a demo, right? I think what's more important is I think step one is become an expert at the problem. And I tell a lot of people that want to start a startup and they're working a job, I tell them, start your startup now. Don't quit your job. Start researching, publish things on LinkedIn, publish things online around the problem and how you're studying the problem and your understanding of the problem. You don't being an expert at the solution is less important than being an expert at the problem. And if you start off becoming an expert at the problem, then that's a great way to engage with the community, with the industry. Because quite honestly, nobody wants to be sold. This is not an industry that wants to be sold. They want to buy. And they want to buy from people that understand what they're doing, that understand the problems equally, or if not better than they do. And so building a reputation around being an expert at these things is very, very important. You know, when I was heavy into the BIM space, early 2000s, I wrote a textbook. I published lots of information. I lectured a lot on the challenges around BIM adoption. I happened to be in the business. I never talked about my business. I was like, you know, these are the challenges I'm seeing. Here's the challenges the industry face. And by the way, if we don't solve these, we're in trouble. We need to figure this out. Um, because in many ways, that's what people get excited about. And I think it's important to be an expert at the problems first. And then you start building against your startup and then start iterating. And then you know, I always say that people talk about pivoting in startup world. It's only a pivot if you come up with a different solution for the same problem. If you run off to solve another problem, that's just a different business. That's not a pivot. That's a do-over. And so when you see a problem, there's so many different ways to approach solving the problem. And I think that's where that's really a pivot. And so so I think it's important, you know, it's 80% of your effort before you raise your first dollar is studying the problem. 20% is the solution, because once you start getting into market, once you're in market, you might learn that your solution is the wrong solution.
Yes, that's absolutely perfect, right? So I'll kind of switch the topic again. We spoke about the startups itself, right? Like how they should start looking at the problem and find solutions based on what the needs are, right? But in general, right now, a lot of AEC companies are looking to come up with their own strategies to implement and continue doing profitable business in this AI environment. So, what are the challenges that they're currently facing in terms of even their business model or how their clients operate and all that, and how should startups understand the need for building these products?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Last week, I spoke to 50 CEOs of the top 100 engineering firms in the country. And I gave them a 2-hour lecture that turned into a 3-hour lecture on AI. The number one thing is they're trying to figure out, they're not trying to figure out the technology. They're trying to figure out the business model. They're trying to figure out the risks, right? So if you're a construction company, you are provided plans and specs. You do not own those plans and specs. You are given them for fair usage to build a building. That is what the fair use is, build a building. If I take all that data and put it into my own AI platform to either monetize it, to use it to do my work better, technically you might be in violation of the fair use, right? So it's a very risk averse industry. None of us enjoy spending time with lawyers. Nobody does. And so what they're trying to really understand is, and then, so you take the risks, then they look at the opportunities. They say, well, if we implement AI, how do we charge for it? If we can do our job cheaper and better because of AI, how do we make money at that? And so my answer is your customers know and will demand that you use AI. And of course they will demand a lower price because they'll do, right? But if you take AI and all you do is put AI in the back office, right? The things behind the scenes, you'll always lose. That'll be a race to the bottom. If you take AI and move it closer and closer to the customer, create a customer experience, then you actually become much more value-based. And that's the key, right? The customer doesn't care how you do your work. And if you're doing it faster, they will figure it out, right? They will figure out you're doing it faster. Then they'll say, well, give me 90% off. You're using AI. I know it doesn't take you that much. But if you actually use AI to drive a new client experience, and then you have a differentiator in the marketplace, then the customer's never going to talk to you about price, right? Customers only talk about price when they see Apple, 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 and they say, which is the cheapest apple? If you throw an orange or a banana in there, it confuses them and you can't be compared, right? So you really have to be differentiated, not by the usual things. Oh, we have an experienced team. Oh, we have all this project portfolio. You know what everyone has all the proposals, responses to RFPs, all these AEC firms, their proposals are identical almost, right? So the only thing the customer has to look at is price after that. So you really have to think about how you differentiate, move AI closer to the client experience versus further from the client experience.
That's a fair point, right? Like we see a lot of startups in the space which essentially sometimes they don't understand the client's workflows, and that will create a big problem for them because they can't incorporate into workflows. And construction being like a complex kind of machine by itself with multiple systems working together to make it work, it becomes like much more complex. But again, going back to your previous discussion with all the CEOs, right? Are there any untapped niches within the construction industry where they believe, or in your discussions that you believe could make a significant impact in the present, kind of working environment? Because every
Yeah, I
competitive
think
right
so.
now.
I'll get to that in a second because I don't think I answered the second part was what does it mean to construction tech firms, right? So for a construction tech startup, if all you do is talk about the contractor's workflows, oh, I'm going to help you do your job better, I'm going to help you be more successful. If you reframe that to say, let me talk about your client and how I can create a unique experience for you and your client and make your client successful, right? We get caught up in trying to make the contractor successful. And the point is that if you don't understand your client's client, then really quite understand. Like they're not going to be excited about your product. Everyone shows up and says, my software will make you execute your projects cheaper, better, faster. Everyone says that. No one comes in and says, oh, use my software, it'll take longer to execute your project. Everyone says cheaper, better, faster. But rarely does a startup say, let me tell you about, you're working for, I'll make it up, you're doing work for JFK Airport. I studied JFK and the Airport Commission. Here's how I think my product can help you serve them better and make a happier client. I've yet to see a startup approach a customer that way. So then the question you just asked was where's this going, right? So I think I'm pretty excited about these ideas around, there's three big trends, right? Three big trends are decarbonization, right? Which is waste, efficiency, upcycling, recycle, all the things, right? And then there's industrialized construction, right? Which is how do we take more of a factory approach to building buildings? So my belief is AI is kind of the hub to that spoke. If AI can help you optimize design, so imagine AI that the designer is making a change today, or the AI finds a problem or makes a change, propagates a design iteration. Owner says, oh, actually, I need this. Designer propagates that, and it makes it to the phone of someone in the field, i.e., there's no change order, there's no RFI. The shop drawing changes in the field, real time. Think about how many emails go back and forth, how many messages go back and forth. Oh, this changed, that design changed. What about this? What about that? Because many owner-driven design changes, once they propagate through the contractor, the subcontractor, the building product rep, all of it, it gets messed up, right? It becomes problematic. It delays the project. It makes the project more expensive. But what if using AI, those changes propagate from the owner to the designer, to the contractor, to the subcontractor, to the trades, to the suppliers, all in seconds, right? So you basically think about, there are no RFIs, there are no change orders, because it's all happening real time, right? And it's all happening proactively. So you take that method and then you look at industrialized construction. The challenge with industrialized construction is nobody wants the same building, right? So if you
True.
take AI and put that in the middle, now think about all those changes. Instead of going to the field, they're actually going to a factory. So now you can actually deliver mass customization, and every building can be different. And the robots in the factory, all the systems in the factory, the minute the design is made, the robots are getting their instructions, right? So I think that the really powerful thing to see is, how does this industrialized construction, decarbonization, and how does AI become the glue that executes on all those things and makes it all more efficient?
Absolutely. I think that's very well put. Again, like in terms of disrupting, so there's a lot of disruption or talk about disruption happening in the the construction industry, and obviously how in a way construction industry has been slow to adopt technologies and all that, right? So are there any specific areas do you believe, like again, I know you answered part of it in terms of the design process and how mechanized construction and everything can utilize those processes. Are there any other areas that you believe can disrupt and create more business opportunities, even obviously for the construction companies, while creating more opportunities for the startups as well?
Yeah, I think, anything, there's lots of opportunities, right? If you look at, and by the way, we say AI is this big bucket, right? You can, you look at computer vision, you look at machine learning. Computer vision, and if you take computer vision and robotics, there are so many opportunities there, right? There's so many opportunities because one, the number one cost in construction is carrying the debt. Every day the project goes on, interest keeps clicking. You're still paying interest, right? So if you look at computer vision and robots, the idea of having a job site that runs 24/7 because there's robots doing the work. And it might be that during the day people are doing the work. But when you leave at night, you turn on all the robots and they keep working. So the intersection of AI and robotics, I think that's a really good place to focus because there's a couple of things. It's easy to do robots these days. You can buy lots of automated platforms, lots of robotic platforms. You don't have to go create your own robotic system. There's lots of robot systems that exist. But what they need is they need instructions to be fed. They need specialized end effectors. So I think construction is such a huge market and it's so fragmented. I don't think it's hard to find a niche because that niche ends up being very, very big. And the reality is there's a global imperative. Nobody wants to be a construction worker. And guess what? Nobody coming up wants to be a construction worker. There's zero interest in that. So I think if you look at that and you look at what you can do with drones to capture data, what robots can do to execute the work, the short, and it's in every country, it's not just in the US. People mostly work in construction because they don't feel like they have many choices and options. We have a generation that understands there's other options. In the US, the biggest problem we have is people say, oh, I can just go drive Uber and make money. And I can do it when I want to. I don't have to do it when you tell me to do. And so it's a huge problem. And I don't think it's just in America. It's all over right now. If you look what's happening in the Middle East, they can't attract enough labor to work in the Middle East. There's just too much work to be done. So I think there's lots of opportunities. And I try to tell entrepreneurs, right? Like they ask me from a venture perspective. Unfortunately, I tend to talk from the entrepreneurial perspective. I've had half a dozen startups. I've never raised venture capital. So what I try to explain to people is you also have to think about, it's not about, some projects are venture fundable, some projects are not. It doesn't mean that a project that is not venture fundable, it does not mean it's a bad project, right? It just
That's
means that
that's right.
you need to plan on not taking venture capital, right? You need to bootstrap and maybe you get some grants or you get a customer to sponsor you, those types of things. So we have the good fortune and we see projects globally. One thing that you mentioned NK, what NK may not tell you, I know he does tell a lot of people, he came onto our website, filled out a form, and had a term sheet in six weeks and got funded in 2 months. One thing we do at Shadow Ventures is everybody comes in through the website. I don't care if Mark Andreessen gives me a referral, I send him the link to our website. I'm like, have them apply here. My first cup of coffee every morning is reviewing applications for funding for startups that open the website, because we think it's really important. How does someone like NK sitting in India that wants to make it into the US and attract funding? Well, does he have a network? The good old boy network of VC is, oh, who do you know? Can I get an introduction? Right? That's the game. But we don't operate that. We want meritocracy, and we want, it's kind of funny. My CTO says, the slicker the pitch deck, the more practiced and rehearsed the pitch deck, the less interested KP is. Builders and engineers and people that are solving real problems don't have time for a slick pitch deck. They're too busy building.
So I have a follow-up question. I mean, thanks for all great insights, KP. My question is that if you've been in US industry for a long time, there's a huge digital divide within the industry, right? If you move outside the top 400, there is not much focus by VCs or entrepreneurs to build the products, to which can help them. So what is your thought on those? Like how you wanna work on the long tail of small and mid-sized contractors who really need the tools, and what is your thought on helping the entrepreneurs to go in that direction?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think, I see pitch decks and everybody has the same 6 logos. Turner, Scansco, same 6 logos, right? And I think if you're going to go down market, you really have to build expertise in the type of projects. In other words, focus on a product and you're focused on airports, you're focused on multifamily, you're focused on office buildings. Because as you go down market, those firms get more specialized. A large firm like Hensel Phelps, it's aviation and multifamily, and like they do everything, right? Once you start to go down market, their question will be not, do you have experience with my competitor? They'll say, what do you know about fire stations? We do 100 fire stations a year. What do you know about fire stations? What do you know about K through 12 schools? So as you go down market, it's more about being really focused on the building types and those segments,
Mm-hmm.
and really understanding those. I tell startups, if you're lucky, you can afford to go to 2 trade shows a year. If you're lucky, right? You don't have the money, it's really difficult. But if you go down market and you say, I'm only going to focus on university projects, there is one trade show to go to with university projects. You can go there, you spend your time there, you spend some money, you build relationships, and you can focus on that. It's very hard when you go downstream. It's very hard to focus as a generalist. You have to really focus on building types.
So to quickly summarize in a layman terms, when you go downstream, your product market fit is like your project product fit. So okay.
Yeah.
So hey Aditya.
KP, one quick other question is, like, I understand as part of your annual summit, and you had like an AI agenda 3 years ago, which was obviously definitely futuristic, and you were trying to pitch that this is where the industry is moving to the clients and your LPs, right? What were your thoughts back then? Like, where were you thinking that the whole industry would be in like 3-4 years? And do you think your thoughts have changed since then?
No, I think where my thoughts have changed, I've been, this industry has a way, when the internet came so my first tech company was construction management software for the web in 1997. And the contractor said, this internet thing, it's a toy, it's for games, it's not for anything. It's for pirating music. Like this, it's not something business grade. And then it took them a long time. And then, it's like they didn't believe it. And then by the time they believe it, it's almost too late. You would run out of funding. I pivoted my company from construction management to project management and moved into the telecom industry. Otherwise, I would have been dead. Then BIM comes along. Oh, BIM is going to transform everything. This is in 2005. In 5 years, every project will have BIM. Right? That's what people were told. That didn't happen for a lot of reasons. Technology adoption, talent. We had a great financial crisis in the middle of it. So a lot of things happened. I think what I am still, I'm trying to be optimistic, but when we talked about AI 3-4 years ago, we were investing in companies that were using AI. Nobody understood it, right? And I used to, it's so funny, I used to tell the startups then, don't talk about AI. People don't understand it. It will confuse them. Don't even talk about it. Just say you're building software, right? Now everything is AI, right? They put AI on everything. What I have been surprised by is how quickly AI has taken this industry by storm. And I think the reason it's different is because it's consumer grade. All of a sudden, everyone has ChatGPT on their phone. Their kids are showing it to them. Your kids weren't showing you, hey, Dad, look, I'm building a building in BIM, right?
Right.
They weren't using BIM on their phone or anything, right? It wasn't consumer grade. I was telling this story yesterday. I was like, me and my wife went through a thing where we used AI to write each other love notes and that was the joke. She was using AI, I was using AI, and we just kept like going back and forth. And so the fact that you're using it in like for fun for everyday life, you start to really recognize the power. If you think about this, when BIM first started taking off, how many CEOs of construction companies, architecture firms, and engineering firms were using BIM?
Right.
How many of them are using AI right now? All of them.
True.
Even if they're just goofing around. Right? So when leadership can understand what the power and vision of technology is, that's what I've been most surprised by, at how fast things are moving. And I think that's why.
That's amazing. In the interest of time, I'd like to close with one quick question and get to the public to kind of ask more questions. So, any final thoughts, key takeaways, or how do you see the whole industry developing in the next 5 to 10 years? Anything that you would like to tell the audience here?
I think um, there's, we have to look at markets. You have to look at capital availability is one thing, right? And I think a lot of startups get too focused on fundraising. I think the next 5 years, one, the technology keeps evolving and keeps moving, but there is a global imperative to do things better. It's not a function of, oh, we have a choice, we should think about it. The labor shortages are real. The backlog is real. The housing crisis is real. The energy transition, these are all real things. And it's not getting better. It's getting, it's a bigger, more of a headwind. And so really, as people are looking at this, they don't have a choice. I would argue that if construction companies could go hire 10 times the people, they might be less interested in technology. Oh, well, we'll hire Steve. Steve will go do that, right? But now they can't hire Steve. They can't hire anyone. They literally cannot hire. It is almost impossible to hire people. So there's that. And then I think if we don't think about technology, we're not going to attract young people into our industry. So even the pipeline of talent goes away. Two of my sons, one's a mechanical engineer at Georgia Tech, the other one's industrial engineering. When I told the second one, you can fly drones for a living if you go work for a construction company. He's like, what? I can fly drones and get paid? I'm like, yeah, you can fly drones and get paid. He got very excited. He's like, Dad, I thought the construction industry is dumb. I'm like, no, they use drones. So I think all of this, I think we have a really exciting 5 years ahead of us. I just see the conversations I'm having with what I call the CEOs that don't have to care. In 5 years, they'll be retired. They all care so much right now. They care so much. I mean, I probably had 30 inbound emails in the last 3 days from CEOs of multi-billion-dollar firms saying, KP, we need your help. Help us figure it out. So I think it's an exciting 5 years. But my advice is focus on building stuff. Focus on building.
Absolutely. I think that's a great way to kind of close the questions from my have. So I'd open it to people. So I think the first question I have in the chat is from Ram. Do you want to ask your question, Ram?
Sure. KP, I mean, you know, the whole LLMs foundation models changed the scenario of the landscape, right? I mean, before LLMs, and if you want to build an AI product, you have some traditional modes you can rely on. Like, I have this data, I have this proprietary, I have this network and distribution. But when everyone is building their AI products on top of open source models, foundation models, how are you going to define new modes? How are you going to differentiate your startup from others? You know, and what is the shadow partners way of doing due diligence on those startups?
Yes. So we're deep, right? We do tech, we do code review. We do a lot of things. We're very nerdy. I say, like, normally we don't move that fast because we dig in. So, when I was building AI platforms 12 years ago in Lisp, creating semantic models, I mean, it was very difficult. The semantic models we had to build are out of the box and with LLMs now, right? I mean, millions of dollars that we spent to build things are obsolete now because you can get it from OpenAI. So if you say, like, LLMs are like a web browser, that's just the basics, right? That's just the basics. It's really what you're going to do in terms of developing your proprietary models, and how you're going to continue to build off of that, right? And I think that's where it becomes super, super critical. The challenge I have with a lot of models that are built on OpenAI is nobody knows what the financial model is, right? I think I did a blog post 6 years ago, and the question was, is your startup really just a feature of AWS? In other words, is Amazon getting more gross margin off of your hosting fees than you're getting from your customers, right? So if you look at the value stack, no one's looking at the financial model here. You go build your entire startup on OpenAI and they double their price. What do? Right? So now with even cloud, we actually tell all our startups, I need to see a multi-cloud model. Do not leverage too much of AWS's proprietary stuff that creates stickiness, because that'll be hard to port off to Google or whatever, or to Azure. So you really have to treat them like a commodity. And if you don't treat them like a commodity, they will take all the value in your business model and you'll be left with less.
Gotcha. So follow-up question on that. Pretty much, if you see any SaaS product or AI product, the traditional business model of pricing is like there's a freemium version, there's enterprise version, and there's somewhere in between. Now, if you use ChatGPT, it's like you have a limit of 25 users per 3 hours, kind of a thing, right? So you pay per use rather than you have blank check of unlimited users. So do you see, like, in future, any AI product built on like a foundation models for the construction, the pricing and business model will be different from current models?
Yeah, I mean, pricing is an interesting thing in our space. I think the biggest thing I see this with startups all the time. They don't ask the customer. They have not talked to the customer about pricing models. They talk to the customer about lots of things, but for some reason, they don't like to talk money in business. I would argue that most freemium models don't even work in the construction industry. Free. No, you know what? They don't want, they'll use free to tinker, but not to deploy. And then you say X dollars per month they're like, well, I only have one project. Why? So they really struggle, or people are coming and going off my project. Why do I have to get them a user account? So I think with all these models, if you are clear about what drives your costs, what drives your value, and you talk to the market about it, they will help. Like, your pricing model becomes self-evident, right? I mean, think about this. If you tell a customer, well, it's free, but after 10 gigs of storage, we start charging, then they go, oh, that's how you make money. It's okay. We're not doing this for fun, right? I mean, maybe we're having fun, but we have a business to run. So I think it's okay to talk to the customer about, well, if you stay under 10 gigs, it's free. If you grow beyond that, that must mean that we're creating a lot of value, and we expect to make money off of that. That's our, the VCs didn't give us money just to not make money,
True. Final question from my end before I jump to other questions. So I mean, you have a lot of experience as a VC, serial entrepreneur, especially in the construction ecosystem. There's a lot of times the product will never go beyond the pilot. Even the most, unicorn status startups also. We do a lot of pilots. Okay, we love it, but it never transform into, okay, we're gonna start paying for project or we'll sign enterprise deal. So what is something you observed in the successful startups and unsuccessful startups in terms of stickiness? What really is the thing that really helped the customer start paying for the product?
I think once the product infiltrates the culture of the organization, that's where the stickiness comes. The business, contractors are very savvy. They don't want to get stuck. They've been down this road. They've seen this before. They're going to do everything they can to mitigate stickiness based on contracts, right? They're always they're very savvy. This is what they do. They deal with risk all day, right? So they're going to be very savvy to not let you create a contract that legally binds them to anything. And that's their prerogative, right? That's their choice. But if you infiltrate the culture of the organization and how the product is ingrained in the culture of the organization, then all of a sudden, no contract matters, right? You are inherent sticky. It's interesting. I'm a big fan of listening to words when people say that. The difference between calling this an iPhone and a smartphone tells you a lot, right? If someone calls every smartphone an iPhone, that's infiltrated the culture, right? So I think that's the key part, is how do you infiltrate the culture? How do you make it part of how they do business every day? And that they don't refer to you as the construction inspection software. They start turning your company name into a verb, right? That's how you know you're starting to get cultural traction.
Just Google it.
Right.
So
Yeah,
there are a few other
that's
questions.
yeah. I think Sumant has a question. It's more about do you fund Indian startups building for Indian AEC? I don't want to answer it for you. I think you can better answer that, KP.
Yeah. We have a hard time funding Indian startups that are serving the Indian market. The reason is then we're just money. Indian startups that want to enter the US market, that's what we did with Constructed and NK. That we like, right? That we're okay with. We don't care where you are, so to speak. Well, we can figure that out. But we don't add a lot of value. If you're an Indian startup serving the Indian market, I don't have the relationships there. Our team does not have the relationships there. So we're kind of dumb money at that point.
And then there is one more question from Danda. So I think they're also like Hong Kong-based startups looking to diversify. He's asking if your fund will be interested. I think KP has answered that question, and I don't want to kind of spend more time on this. You can go to their website, put in your application on that, and obviously KP and the team will reach out to you if they're interested. Any other open questions from anyone on the call? Harsh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Harsh, you need to unmute yourselves.
Yeah. It's still muted on your side.
I don't know.
Okay. Anyone else? Kashish, Chaitanya, Omkar? Yep.
Yep.
Harsh? Okay.
I guess
Anyway,
meanwhile,
I think Harsh, if any questions, I think KP is on with us, on the CTribe group. So feel free to ask any questions that you might have, or if anything that you can reach. I think you can reach out to KP as well. Any more questions?
Harsh, you could unmute yourself now. Give a shot.
Yep, I can do it. Sorry about that. Hi, KP. First
Yeah,
of all, thank you so much for this great insights. I think this was very valuable. My question is around labor shortage. I think you touched briefly on that, but I was curious to hear your thought on like what is the fundamentally what are we doing right, or what should we change, or what should we do exactly to attract younger generation into this industry, like every other industry, tech industry or other industries, they are attracting a lot of younger generation into the workforce, but specifically construction, that is where there seems to be a little less interest in amongst people. Like what are the fundamental challenges from your point of view, and how can we address it?
Yeah, I think one thing I think that is kind of pretty important is young people specifically, they need a mentor that they respect, that they believe they can learn from, that will take the time. So I think that's super important to anyone starting off in any career. And I think historically, this industry, they just tell you go figure it out. There is no formalized training. There is no formalized onboarding. Here's the keys to a truck. Get out there and figure it out, right? So I think how we think about training on onboarding is super important. I think the tools that we give them, the difference between, hey, here's a notebook and some boots versus here's a drone and an iPad changes the game, right? Just how we even think about what tools are important to them are very important. So I think those are two things. My eldest son interned in New York City with a structural engineering firm. And if you ask him how it went, he's like, Dad, my mentor was amazing. 40 years in the business. He probably spent 2-3 hours a day with me. Right? That was amazing for him. The work was good too. The work was interesting. But just having someone that was spending the time to teach him, I think was super important. I think our industry, sometimes everybody's just too busy. Oh, just go out to the job, go out to the site, you'll figure it out.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
KP, follow-up question on that.
I think, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so there are two things, right? One is the culture of you need a degree to have a career or life everywhere. I think it's in US or India. And there is that also create a kind of a not much interest in going to the trade schools. So what is a plan or ideas to attract the young people to go to the trade school, that saying that you don't need a degree to have a good career?
Yeah, it's a really tough one. In my engineering career, we had engineers, there were degreed engineers, professional engineers, and then we had technicians. And the technicians were usually 2-year trade school and whatnot. And I think the challenge is for the trade school employees, they have a hard time seeing upward mobility. like as an engineer, they say you start off as a staff engineer, then you're a project engineer. Then like they tell you exactly the pay bands, what you need to do, all these things, right? It's very regimented. It's very, for technician level or trades level, we don't do a good job of telling them what's next. We just say, oh, there's a lot of demand. So I'll go be a carpenter. So that means I'm going to swing a hammer and be a carpenter for the next 50 years of my life. I mean, I don't think I want to do that. I'll do it for 1 year, 2 years. So I don't think we communicate well. And also, have we organizationally designed these businesses so that you can move up? My boss actually, as an engineer, was a high school graduate. He happened to be in the Vietnam War with the president. That's how he got there. He started off as a concrete technician and moved all the way up to being a vice president. So all the engineering technicians we hired, they saw him as the example. Like, this guy, he's driving a Lexus. This guy gets to wear a suit and tie to work. I want to be him. And we were able to acquire, but that's a very rare situation. All the rest of our offices, we had 300 offices around the world. It was not the same.
True. I think upward mobility is a key for anyone who is passionate to ambitious. Mm. Aditya, you have one more.
Yeah, there is one more question from Danda. This is again, as I said, Danda, if you have any specific questions related to the startup and the space, you could directly reach out. But another general question from him is, what he wants to know about, the AI-powered robotic facade inspection market, or how that has been growing, or if you have any insights on that.
Yeah, so one of our companies, Aren, AREN.ai, they do bridge inspection, facade inspections, roof inspections, pavement inspections. So we've seen that business grow and do amazing things, right? So I think what's interesting about any of the inspection software and where it's going is it's really changing the dynamic of whose responsibility is it. Generally the owner outsources to an engineering consultant. The current model is they outsource to an engineering consultant that uses technology tools to execute the project. What we're starting to hear from asset owners, whether it's buildings, bridge, airports, whatever, is how do I have a direct relationship with you? How do I buy your software? Why do I need an engineering company to fly a drone and use your software? I mean, anyone can do that. And so it's creating some interesting dynamics around, when do you need a professional engineer involved and when don't you need a professional engineer involved? And I think it's really interesting because the asset owners are starting to question, like, what liability is a professional engineer taking, or are they? If all they're doing is looking at drone data that's been analyzed by software versus them analyzing drone data by the human eye. And do you even need a PE to sign off on it? Is that made up? Do the engineering associations, right? Did they say, oh, no, you need an engineer to review that? Or do you only need an engineer to review something in terms of remediation and design, right? So there's a lot of questions there. It's a really big growth industry because, quite honestly, most of the engineering firms don't want to have anything to do with it. It's a pain. It's not a lucrative business for them. One of our LPs actually got out of the bridge inspection business, but after we invested in Aren, they got back into it. And the reason they got out of it is it's low margin business. And I have very few engineers. I can put them on higher margin projects. And using our technology, they were able to go back into the bridge inspection business.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one more experience. Again, my spouse works as a structural engineer, and she talks about doing bridge inspections, how they have to train how to hook themselves, and it's also a bit more physically challenging sometimes, and a lot of risk involved. So I think using technology to do those kind of bridge inspections is definitely growing, in especially in the New York and big cities here in the US. So I think that's my 2 cents
Yeah.
to Danda as well.
When I was an engineer, they handed me a rope, a hard hat, and said, "Hey, go to this building and inspect the facade."
Yeah, inspect the facade, inspect the bridges. So
Yeah, and
yeah, it's
the whole
definitely
day
growing.
down, I was wondering, like, why did I go to college for this?
Great comment, KP. That just a follow-up question on that thing. Do you feel like regulation is actually stifling the innovation in this industry? There need to be better regulatory policies to unlock the potential of the industry, especially in the housing side. Hmm.
Yeah, I know 100%. I think, the meeting I had last week, I was really challenging these CEOs. If we wait for the government to develop policy, we will be waiting for a very, very long time, and they will do it wrong. When when the senators were grilling all the tech people last year, and they didn't even understand like what question. Forget about the answers; they didn't know the right questions to ask. It's a joke, right? So I think if industry creates policy that's reasonable and ethical and safe, and brings that to government, here's how we want to be regulated, here's what we think makes sense. We understand, we're engineers, we understand the risks, we understand liability, we understand all of it. Then I think that's a better way to go. I will tell you this, everyone just saying no is not going to work. It's just not going to work. People will do it anyway.
Uday,
Yeah,
go ahead.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, actually, KP is discussing about attracting about the younger generations. I can say I'm one of those. I mean, I'm currently studying MS. So even in our curriculum, there is no AI subjects involved in the construction management or stuff related to that. I mean, what type of stuff can you say that are the key entry points for the younger generation like us to even learn more about that?
Yeah, I think that and I saw this with BIM, I saw this with the internet. When I was in college, my professor introduced me to the internet in 1991. Said put all my class notes on the internet. I was like, what is this, right? So that I got early. I was fortunate that I had a professor that understood these things. I think if we're going to depend on the educational system to keep up with what's happening with technology and innovation, we'll always be disappointed. I think educational system is there to teach you how to be a better learner, and you learn some things along the way. So I think when you have a generation that has access to YouTube and Reddit and GitHub and all these tools, I think it's really your responsibility. If you're generally interested and you generally want to learn more, there are more ways to learn about anything advanced than ever before. And it's not really realistic for the educational system to catch up. It's just not. There will be a few institutions that do it, but many won't. So I think it's incumbent on people in university to think about everything else that's going on and to learn on their own. I mean, apparently, like the younger generation goes to YouTube to learn everything. Well, you can learn just about everything on the internet if you're motivated and interested. And I think once you get into the workforce, then I think it's incumbent on your employer to give you time, space, money, whatever it is for your further development. Maybe you don't want to go to get your continuing education units to some building product reps lunch and learn, right? Maybe instead you want to go to an AI class during lunch. I think that's where industry leadership has to provide some flexibility to let the newer engineers and architects and contractors give them space to go learn on their own, even if they're not going to provide the learning for them.
Yeah. And I think, Uday, what you could probably do, again, not speaking what courses are there in your college and your university, but you can cross register between different departments. I know you could take like, a AI 101 or something related in the computer science department and just understand how things work there, and then think about implementing into construction, if that's what you want to take as a career.
Okay, okay, got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Kashish, sorry to interrupt you before. One last question and we can end the session. Thank you.
Sure. Uh, Hi everyone. So anyone, this is an open question to all. So one of the major issues we face in this industry is the implementation of the product. Sometimes or many times I have seen and we have experienced that the product is good, it has good KPIs, but unfortunately the organizations and the individuals in those organizations struggle to implement those such technologies for many of the reasons. So can I understand like or a way by which this thing can be sorted out? This is an open question to anyone, everyone over here, not only KP sir or to any specific, but this is one of the major issues which the industry I feel has been witnessing. So if anyone could answer this.
I mean, I'll give you my 2 cents, but I think on the implementation side, there's just a general lack of experience by these firms in following any kind of implementation methodology. And there's a heavy dependency on the vendor to do so, which makes it more expensive. Nobody on this call was trained on how to use Facebook, the training class. And so I think on the implementation side, once it starts hitting corporate systems and it gets complicated, then and training gets complicated, then it's a pretty big overhead for companies to adopt. So I think that's one of those kind of issues. I think within the firms too, everybody's very overtaxed. To say, oh, we're so busy, we don't have enough warm bodies, and to tell people that, oh, spend 20 hours a week doing R&D or training on this product or whatever else, it's really, really tough for companies to make space. So there's this contrary thing that I think startups really do is they say, if the CEO says, I love what you're doing, go talk to my IT manager. And then the IT manager says, oh, this is really interesting, go talk to the superintendent or this project engineer. They do that because, oh, it's only $29 a month. It's only $300 a month, right? And I've seen this firsthand. Giving a CEO or a CTO what the total cost of, like, if our product is successful, this is what your investment will be. It's not $300. It's $300,000 if we're successful. And as a startup, you feel like, well, I don't want to give a big number. But you know what? If you give a big number, the CEO has to keep talking to you. If you say it's $300,000, the CEO has to keep talking to you and have a relationship with you, because they can't say, oh, go talk to the superintendent to make a $300,000 decision. So there's a balance of understanding and communicating. There's this idea that, like, oh, we go in with $300 and then we'll expand from there. Sometimes the customers get frustrated with that because they don't actually know how to allocate resources for true enterprise implementation. And so sometimes you're better off saying, like, here's what it'll cost you. Not just money on the licenses, but here's also your time. Here's how much time you should expect to invest to get on board and be onboarded and implement our system. And so if you think like a CEO, if you think like a CIO, and give them the tools to make decisions, then they're not blindsided. A lot of CIOs get very frustrated that somebody buys a $300 a month product and then they go to try to implement it in, enterprise-wide, and they don't have time or budget to do it, and they feel like they're stuck.
Sure. Thanks.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. I think we have run out of time. But again, Thank you so much, KP. Again, really appreciate you jumping in on a Friday evening and readily accepting our request to do the session. And any other questions that any of the members have, you can just feel free to reach out to us, or KP is also on the WhatsApp group, so you can reach out to him if you have any questions as well. But really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you so much,
Sure.
KP, and
Happy
thank
to
you
do
so
it.
much everyone for joining us.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Thank
Yep,
you.
absolutely. Pleasure